Breaking news spread across the globe before dawn. NASA has confirmed the impossible. A second wave of deep space signals, identical to those first detected in 2023, has just been received, this time far stronger and unmistakably from the direction of the Andromeda Galaxy. Within minutes, control rooms in Pasadena, Berlin, and Tokyo went silent. Lines were jammed, monitors flickered, and somewhere in the chaos, one of the engineers whispered, "It's back." No one dared to finish the sentence. At first, the anomaly was thought to be a software error. The telemetry from the Deep Space Network suddenly dropped by 87% in stability. Data streams froze for several seconds, then resumed, but with strange pulses hidden in the background noise. Analysts tried to decrypt them, assuming a calibration glitch, yet the pattern persisted. The same series of rhythmic bursts appeared on 3 independent receivers. The probability of coincidence? Less than 1 in 10 billion. The first signal, 2 years ago, had been dismissed as a cosmic echo, a reflection of human transmissions bouncing off interstellar gas clouds. But this was different. The frequency was cleaner, the amplitude unnervingly precise. According to internal documents later leaked online, the waveform contained repetitions, not random spikes, but sequences resembling binary clusters. 1001, 101, then a pause, then 101 again. Some claimed it was a natural pulsar imitation. Others said it was deliberate. Inside the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, red lights flashed across consoles as servers began auto-locking. The system triggered a Level 3 containment protocol, reserved for potential biological or non-terrestrial intelligence encounters. Nobody outside those rooms was supposed to know. Yet within hours, encrypted screenshots began surfacing on the dark web. Graphs of repeating oscillations, labeled ASIG-2, source, M31 core. Experts tried to downplay them, but the timestamps matched the exact moment of signal detection. By mid-morning, European observatories confirmed similar readings. The frequency band, 1420 MHz, the hydrogen line, was universally known as the cosmic calling card, the most likely wavelength an intelligent civilization would use to communicate. You could almost feel the collective shiver that went through the global scientific community. No natural source should be transmitting there, not with such mathematical precision. And yet it was happening again. Then came the silence. NASA's live streams were cut mid-sentence. Official channels went offline citing maintenance. Journalists attempting to reach spokespersons were met with automated replies. No comment. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Was this a breakthrough or a warning? Unofficially, several insiders reported that the signal's amplitude wasn't constant. It was escalating. Every 6 minutes, the intensity spiked, as if something on the other end was responding, adapting, or listening. One technician described it as a conversation without words, accelerating toward something. When a team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory tried to triangulate the exact point of origin, they discovered minor deviations, like the source wasn't stationary, but moving. Slowly. Meanwhile, a small probe near Mars, part of the old Odyssey relay system, unexpectedly rebooted itself after years of dormancy. Its log file contained corrupted data fragments with the same binary headers as the Andromeda signal. Coincidence? Hardly. Engineers claimed a micrometeorite impact had triggered it. But the probability that an inactive probe would reactivate exactly at the time of the second wave seemed absurd. People began to ask questions the authorities couldn't answer. Why were the transmissions being filtered? Why were spectrograms vanishing from public archives within minutes of posting? And why did the Deep Space Network's main antenna in Canberra briefly rotate toward Earth, as if to receive something not from the stars, but from us? You can imagine the fear that swept through the observatories. Scientists who had waited their entire lives for proof of other intelligence now found themselves dreading it. The patterns were too deliberate, too close, too aware. One leaked message from a researcher simply read, "It's not distant anymore." For decades, humanity has dreamed of hearing from beyond. But what if the response doesn't bring enlightenment, but panic? What if the cosmos itself is not silent but watching? Because tonight, for the second time in recorded history, the universe spoke back. And this time, it didn't sound like an accident. It started with a simple alert, barely noticeable in the digital noise of the global network. The first human to report it was an amateur radio astronomer in southern Spain, monitoring the 1420 MHz hydrogen line late at night. Her equipment, a modest array of antennas and a high-sensitivity receiver, picked up a peculiar sequence, pulses that didn't belong to any known pulsar, quasar, or man-made satellite. At first, she assumed a malfunction, a glitch in her signal processor. But when she cross-referenced the anomaly with data from the European Space Agency's public feed, the same bursts appeared, synchronized down to the millisecond. Within hours, the news reached NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. An internal bulletin marked Confidential ASIG-2 instructed all staff to lock terminals and report anomalies directly to the Central Command. The bulletin described what was quickly being called the Andromeda Signal Wave 2, a series of structured electromagnetic pulses exhibiting repetition and modulation patterns that mimicked artificial encoding. Technical jargon filled the memo: frequency drift, phase coherence, signal-to-noise ratios. But beneath the sterile language, the message was clear. This was not random. Something, somewhere, was transmitting intelligently. The first detailed telemetry revealed that the signal appeared to originate near the core of M31, Andromeda's central bulge. Yet subtle inconsistencies suggested movement. Astronomers noticed an oscillation pattern, almost like a heartbeat, superimposed on the main transmission. One line in a later leaked internal report stood out. The signal exhibits microvariations inconsistent with natural astrophysical sources. Probability of terrestrial interference: 0.001%. This was not an error in instruments, not a reflection of our own transmissions bouncing off interstellar dust. Something alive, or something conscious, was sending a message across 2.5 million light-years. Soon, images emerged, captured by orbiting observatories and long-range telescopes. The visuals were faint, barely discernible, but persistent. Shapes within the signal's source region that defied conventional classification. Some resembled geometric structures, others were abstract, almost organic in form. Scientists tried to dismiss them as artifacts, cosmic rays, striking detectors, lens flares, but the patterns appeared across multiple independent sensors, recorded at different wavelengths, and yet always corresponding to the timing of the pulses. A small internal team leaked fragments of a secret report, an analysis labeled NASA DSN Internal Briefing, 2025-1012. Among the notes, repeated sequences detected, 11:01:01:01, followed by pauses of 7.8 seconds. Sequences maintain temporal symmetry. Signal reacts to external probing. When attempted broadcast pulses are sent, secondary modulations appear. The language was cautious, almost clinical, but the implication was staggering. The source was responsive. It was interacting. Within days, the pattern began to show signs of alarming complexity. The pulses formed secondary sequences that resembled prime numbers, the Fibonacci series, and even structures reminiscent of binary-coded prime factorization. Analysts called it a signature of intelligence, yet no one could explain the method of propagation. Some theorized quantum-level encoding. Others suggested exotic forms of communication beyond human comprehension. Meanwhile, anomalies started surfacing closer to home. Deep space probes, long thought inactive, began reporting unusual telemetry. OSIRIS-REx recorded minor orientation shifts. Perseverance reported transient magnetometer fluctuations. Voyager 1, drifting beyond the heliopause, detected low-amplitude bursts that matched the same frequency pattern. It was as if the Andromeda signal wasn't merely being transmitted. It was reaching out, influencing instruments light-years apart. Amid growing secrecy, leaked communications hinted at paranoia within NASA itself. Certain servers were suddenly wiped, archived spectrograms disappeared within minutes of uploading, and several senior staff members reportedly requested temporary leave under personal reasons. Rumors circulated that international space agencies were coordinating to suppress data, fearing mass panic or political fallout. Yet fragments always slipped through. Images, waveform charts, and raw audio files containing what some described as subtle harmonic tones, barely audible, interlaced with static. In a few of these recordings, trained analysts claimed to hear faint syllables, human-like intonations repeating in loops, though completely unintelligible. The most troubling revelation came from a confidential log of the Deep Space Network in Canberra. A temporary rotation of the antenna pointed directly at Earth, aligning for precisely 12 minutes, coinciding with the signal's peak amplitude. Engineers recorded this anomaly, but were forbidden from discussing it publicly. Independent analysts later speculated, was the signal acknowledging our presence? Was it observing, studying, or even attempting to communicate with us? As the world watched from afar, an eerie realization settled among the global scientific community. This was not a distant curiosity, a puzzle to solve decades from now. The Andromeda wave was active, deliberate, and frighteningly close to comprehension. Every new sequence, every sudden spike in intensity, suggested a mind behind the message, a mind so advanced it could manipulate the very medium of space to respond to our instruments. In those tense hours, several unnamed researchers began leaving cryptic notes in private forums. If this is a warning, we may already be too late. Another wrote, "It's intelligent, it's waiting, and it knows we're listening." Humanity, for the first time, felt the thin line between curiosity and dread. The signals were no longer abstract numbers on a screen. They were something alive, something observing, calculating, and perhaps even anticipating our reactions. And yet, despite all the evidence, despite every shred of leaked telemetry, the official story remained silent. No press conference, no statement, no explanation, only the data, the pulses, and a growing sense that whatever was reaching across 2 million light-years was not random. Something truly unprecedented had occurred, and scientists knew it. They knew it with a clarity that made them tremble. It was not a malfunction. It was not a coincidence. Something intelligent, was making contact. And as they stared at the repeating sequences on their screens, one thought pressed into every mind. This is only the beginning. The world had begun to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. but understanding was still out of reach. In quiet offices and dimly lit observatories, the greatest minds in space science wrestled with the data. Elon Musk, normally unflappable, was reportedly pacing the halls of SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne. A leaked internal memo described him as visibly shaken, speaking to a small circle of engineers and astrophysicists in a tone that blended awe and fear. According to fragments of an interview posted online, he said, "The telescopes are capturing an object, or perhaps a signal, that doesn't obey the laws of physics as we know them. Its energy signatures fluctuate without apparent source, and the modulation is intelligent. This is not science fiction. This is reality, staring us in the face." Meanwhile, Michio Kaku, famed for his work on theoretical physics and cosmic communication, was recording a lecture for a private online forum when he broke his usual measured tone. "You have to understand," he said, voice tight, eyes scanning the notes as if seeking reassurance from the page. "We are looking at patterns in the Andromeda transmission that suggest cognition, repetition, prime number sequences, Fibonacci-like structures. These are not cosmic coincidences. There is intention behind them. And if there is intention, then there is intelligence." The forum post disappeared within hours, leaving only screenshots that circulated across encrypted networks, each shared with whispers of fear. Inside NASA, the situation was no less tense. The chief astrophysicist at Goddard, a veteran of decades in deep space observation, confided in a leaked chat, writing, "We've calibrated, recalibrated, and checked every instrument. Nothing explains this, not natural radiation, not interference, not a satellite glitch. Whatever is producing this signal, it is deliberate. It is aware of us." Colleagues confirmed that he rarely allowed his private messages to leak, and yet in this case, the urgency overrode protocol. Scientists across the globe reported similar reactions. Sleepless nights spent cross-referencing anomalies, scribbled equations pinned to walls, whiteboards covered with modulation patterns no one could fully decipher. In private, teams whispered about the Andromeda entity, a term no one would dare to put in official reports, but which became shorthand in emergency communications. Some described fleeting glimpses of shapes on telescope monitors, anomalous clusters of light that seemed almost to move deliberately across the pixels. Others heard distorted audio snippets buried within the signals, fragments that sounded like human voices yet distorted, alien, and eerily deliberate. Even those who had spent careers studying distant stars admitted to fear. Forums and private channels were filled with messages that read like confessions. "I've spent my life preparing to find life elsewhere, but this is beyond preparation." The consensus grew that whatever was reaching us was not only intelligent, but capable of perceiving the responses of our own technology. It was as if humanity itself had become part of an experiment we had no control over. Musk, Kaku, and the NASA chief all independently arrived at the same conclusion. The Andromeda signal was not a passive transmission. It responded to probing, fluctuated when measured, and adapted its sequences in a manner that suggested awareness. Rumors of meetings between international space agencies, kept secret from the public, hinted that the anomaly might warrant coordinated global observation, but no official statements were ever issued. As the days passed, the tension became unbearable. High-level communications were encrypted. Analysts worked in isolation. One scientist, whose name was later redacted from all public records, allegedly told colleagues, We are standing at the edge of something monumental and terrifying. We are witnessing intelligence beyond our comprehension, and yet it is not distant. It is close enough to observe, to react, to interact with us. This is no longer theoretical. This is happening. But Musk was not the only one who knew the truth. In a small office somewhere in the outskirts of Geneva, a single researcher had quietly attempted to send a preliminary response signal, an experiment never authorized by any agency. According to recovered logs, the attempt briefly triggered a cascade of signal modulations from Andromeda, sequences repeating faster and more complex than anything previously recorded. This lone act, unnoticed at first, hinted that the Andromeda wave might not only be intelligent, but actively testing humanity's capability to communicate. By the end of the week, a subtle panic had taken root among those who could understand the full implications. For the first time, even the world's most confident scientists were confronting the unthinkable. The Andromeda signal was alive, aware, and it had chosen to make contact on its own terms. By the third week of observations, it became terrifyingly clear that the Andromeda signal was no longer static. It had evolved. The bursts of electromagnetic pulses that once repeated in orderly sequences now began to shift in ways that suggested intentional modulation. Each time researchers sent probing signals back, even the briefest calibration ping, the returning pulses changed in real time, almost as if the signal were listening, processing, and responding. Patterns emerged that defied conventional explanation. Sequences that mirrored prime numbers, Fibonacci progressions, and complex permutations that hinted at reasoning far beyond human comprehension. The implications were chilling. Was this truly intelligence, or something altogether different? An artificial mind, perhaps, originating from a civilization we could not even imagine? NASA's internal communications leaked again, fragments appearing on encrypted channels. One message attributed to a senior data analyst read simply, "The signal is imitating voice," or something like it. "We hear syllables, almost words, but not in any language we know. Every attempt to respond triggers changes in the sequences. It is observing, adapting. It is aware." Across multiple observatories, engineers reported hearing faint harmonic modulations in real time. Initially dismissed as equipment noise, these harmonics were later confirmed to carry structured repeating intervals. Linguists and mathematicians working with the data began to speculate. Was this a rudimentary form of communication? And if so, who or what was on the other side? Suddenly, instruments worldwide started to behave unpredictably. Deep space probes that had long been dormant powered up independently, capturing fragments of the Andromeda signal with unprecedented clarity. One telescope's optics shifted subtly on their own during calibration, pointing toward coordinates not listed in any programming. Scientists joked darkly that the universe was reaching back. The frequency oscillations were precise, as if testing our detection capabilities, and the data streams appeared to respond differently depending on the nature of the interrogation. Every action humanity took seemed to provoke a reaction from the unknown source. Paranoia spread quickly. Internal NASA logs suggested deletions of critical archives, wiping of spectral images, and sudden disappearance of research assistants, all under unexplained circumstances. Rumors circulated that a hidden global consortium had convened in secret, debating whether to issue warnings to the public or maintain silence. In private forums, experts began asking questions they were too afraid to voice in official settings. Why is it behaving like it understands us? Why are all monitoring systems suddenly reporting the same anomalies? Some suggested artificial intelligence, others extraterrestrial consciousness, but no theory could fully account for the scale and precision of the phenomenon. The most disturbing revelation came when attempts were made to send structured replies. A carefully encoded sequence, designed to mirror the Andromeda pulse patterns, was transmitted from the Arecibo replacement array. Within minutes, the returning pulses morphed into entirely new sequences, this time incorporating numerical patterns that corresponded almost eerily with human timekeeping, as though the signal were acknowledging the rhythm of our world. Analysts described a chilling sensation. The signal was not merely reacting. It seemed to anticipate intent, testing comprehension, measuring capability, almost teasing humanity with the realization that we were not alone, and that we were being studied. Witnesses reported inexplicable phenomena: computers executing unsent commands, spectrograms revealing geometric shapes impossible to produce through natural interference, and low-frequency vibrations detected near research stations with no discernible source. Attempts to record these events often failed, data corrupted or lost in transit, further amplifying fear and suspicion. Conversations leaked from private labs hinted at a singular conclusion: it is conscious. It knows we are watching, and it may already be deciding what comes next. Even world leaders took notice. Briefings described signals that might mimic human speech, fragments resembling a warning: do not interfere, observe only. No one knew if this was a threat, a test, or a message lost in translation. Publicly, there were no statements. Privately, panic simmered. Scientists, engineers, and policymakers alike faced an impossible question: how do you prepare for a conscious entity communicating across 2 million light-years? And then, in the middle of a routine telemetry check, something unprecedented occurred. Every monitoring system worldwide recorded a simultaneous surge, a coherent, unbroken pulse lasting precisely 17 seconds, followed by complete silence. The signals had responded in unison to an unknown trigger. Observers stared at their screens, pale and trembling, realizing that when humanity attempted to respond, the Andromeda wave had changed everything. It was no longer just a signal. It was active, it was aware, and it was in control of the next move. The world seemed to pause. For a brief, suspended moment, humanity held its collective breath as instruments went dark. NASA ceased all public transmissions. Telescopes, once reliably tracking the Andromeda signal, no longer responded. It was as if the universe itself had fallen silent, leaving behind only a profound, almost suffocating anticipation. Across research centers, scientists exchanged glances heavy with disbelief. The pulse that had surged across every observatory moments before had vanished, yet its imprint remained, etched into every spectrogram, every waveform, as if a message had been delivered and recorded in a code only the cosmos understood. Private channels were flooded with speculation. Some suggested the signal had withdrawn, choosing to observe us from afar. Others whispered darker theories. Perhaps it had assessed humanity and decided on a course of action, one we could neither predict nor comprehend. Michio Kaku was among the first to vocalize the unthinkable in a leaked recording. We may not be ready to hear what comes next. The Andromeda wave has intelligence, possibly far surpassing anything on Earth, and it may already be judging us. At the same time, anomalies continued. Dormant probes exhibited subtle, inexplicable movements. Even satellites in geostationary orbit showed micro-adjustments that couldn't be explained by gravity or solar winds. Internal reports hinted that some instruments had recorded low-level harmonic vibrations synchronized with the pulse's last burst, suggesting a resonance so precise that it could only be intentional. It was as if the signal, having withdrawn, was leaving behind fingerprints of its presence, a silent reminder that it had been there and that it had known we were listening. Across the globe, scientists reflected in quiet, closed-door meetings. Questions haunted them. Was this a warning, a test, or an invitation? Every possible explanation seemed simultaneously plausible and terrifying. Humanity had glimpsed the existence of a conscious force beyond the stars, something capable of observing, measuring, and interacting with us across unimaginable distances. And yet, despite the revelation, the world was left without answers, staring into a void of uncertainty. A few brave researchers attempted one final experiment, sending carefully calibrated signals into space in hopes of eliciting a response. For a fleeting moment, monitors flickered. Then silence. The Andromeda wave had vanished from our instruments, yet the sense of awareness lingered. It was no longer a matter of curiosity or exploration. Humanity had touched something ancient and intelligent, and it had left us with a message unspoken, yet unmistakably clear. We were being observed, and the next encounter, if it came, might not wait for preparation or understanding. In those silent moments, a philosophical realization settled over the scientific community. Perhaps humanity was not yet ready for contact. Perhaps the universe had been observing us all along, quietly waiting for the moment when we could comprehend the enormity of the unknown. And in that waiting, there was both a warning and a promise. Knowledge could be gained, but it came with the weight of responsibility, of consequence, and of humility. Then, just as suddenly as it had ceased, the connection reappeared. The Andromeda wave, the second pulse, the intelligence that had silently reached across millions of light years, had begun transmitting again. No one knew its intent. No one knew its audience. But one fact was undeniable. The signal was still there, alive, and its purpose remained inscrutable.